She was standing in our driveway, calm as stone, when the so-called HOA cops pulled up with flashing lights. The leader jumped out, pointed his gun straight at her, and shouted, "Hands where I can see them! You're trespassing on HOA property!" I froze for a second, not because I believed them, but because I couldn't believe how far Karen had gone this time. She was standing right behind them with that smug little smile, like she had already won. My wife didn't flinch. She crossed her arms and stared him down like she was the one in charge here. Karen's voice rang out, sharp and arrogant. "That house belongs to the HOA now. You and your wife need to leave before we make." "You!" She waved a piece of paper in the air, another. One of her fake legal notices, stamped with a seal she probably printed at home. The neighbors peeked from their windows, whispering, recording with their phones, hungry for drama. The fake cop pressed his gun closer, his hands shaking a little. My wife tilted her head, her calm starting to cut through the tension. "You really think pointing that at me is a good idea?" she said slowly. Karen laughed. "What's she gonna do? Call the real cops?" "We are the cops!" That line got a few chuckles from the men in black uniforms behind him, but not from my wife. She leaned just slightly forward and said in a low voice only he could hear, "Big mistake." He blinked, caught off guard. For a split second, I saw doubt flash across his face. He didn't know yet, but he was about to find out. The silence cracked when my wife slowly lifted her jacket, revealing the holstered pistol on her hip, shiny, legal, and carried under full permit. The fake officer's eyes widened, and he jerked his gun back like he had touched fire. Karen gasped, then shouted, "That's illegal! She can't carry that here! Arrest her right now!" My wife didn't move, didn't even blink. She just let the weight of the badge clipped, next to her permit card shine in the sunlight. "Ex-military," she said evenly, her voice steady as steel. "Qualified, licensed. You point that toy at me again, and you'll regret it." The men behind the leader started whispering nervously, shifting on their feet. One even lowered his fake badge, suddenly realizing the game was crumbling. Karen, red-faced, tried to push forward, waving her papers at my wife like they were shields. "This is my neighborhood. I run this place," she screamed, spittle flying. But my wife finally stepped closer, closing the gap between her and the man still holding the gun. She didn't touch her weapon, didn't need to. She leaned in, her eyes locked on his, and whispered, "You have no idea who you're pointing that at." The neighbors filming from across the street went quiet, holding their breath. For the first time, the so-called HOA cops looked like they weren't sure if they were the hunters or the ones about to be hunted. Karen wasn't about to back down. She shoved her fake notice against my chest, her voice shrill enough to cut through the whole block. "Read it! You've been evicted by the HOA board. Your so-called wife is trespassing, and if she doesn't leave, we'll drag her out ourselves." The paper shook in her hand, not from fear, but from the wild certainty that she controlled everything. I crumpled the notice in my fist and stared her dead in the eye. "This land isn't HOA property. It's mine, inherited, recorded with the county. You don't own a single brick here." That should have been enough. But Karen smirked like she had a secret weapon waiting in her back pocket. She pointed at my wife's gun. "She won't fire. She can't. Because we already called the sheriff, and when he arrives, you'll both be in cuffs." But what Karen didn't know, what none of them knew, was that my wife had trained the sheriff's deputies. She'd spent years running drills with them, teaching them how to handle weapons under pressure. And at that exact moment, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Sheriff Daniels himself, on my way. "Don't let them move." My wife caught the flicker of recognition in my eyes and gave the smallest smile. Then, without warning, she snapped her voice like thunder, "Drop the gun, now!" The man flinched, his hands trembling. The neighbors across the street gasped. For the first time, the fake cops looked like they were realizing the trap they'd just walked into. The fake officer's hands shook harder, and the gun wavered in the air. He tried to steady himself, but my wife's tone had already broken his confidence. One of the men in the back whispered, "This doesn't feel right. Maybe we should leave." Karen spun on him like a snake. "Shut up! Nobody leaves until I say so!" Her voice cracked, more desperate than powerful now. Just then, the sound of sirens began to echo faintly down the street. Red and blue lights flickered off the windows of the houses. Karen's smirk faltered, but she quickly forced it back, screaming, "Good! The real cops are here. Finally, you'll see what happens when you mess with me." But when the sheriff's cruiser pulled up, my wife didn't even flinch. She stepped aside, hands still away from her weapon, as Sheriff Daniels climbed out. He took one look at her, nodded respectfully, and then turned his cold eyes on Karen and her so-called HOA cops. "What's going on here?" he asked sharply. Karen shoved forward, pointing her finger straight at me. "Arrest them! They're refusing HOA orders, and she's armed illegally." The fake officer chimed in, trying to sound tough. "We had to intervene, Sheriff. They're dangerous." Daniels raised a brow, his voice calm but laced with steel. "Funny, because I know her." He gestured toward my wife. "She trained half my deputies. And if she's armed, then she's legal." The crowd of neighbors broke into murmurs. Phones kept recording. Karen's face drained of color, and for the first time she looked uncertain. My wife folded her arms again, her eyes never leaving Karen. "Told you," she murmured. Karen's mouth opened and closed, like she couldn't decide whether to scream or beg. Finally, she shrieked, "They're lying! Sheriff, they forged the papers. This whole property belongs to the HOA." She waved the crumpled notice around as if it were proof carved in stone. Sheriff Daniels reached over, snatched it from her hand, and scanned it for 2 seconds before letting out a sharp laugh. "This?" he said, holding it up for the neighbors to see. "This isn't a legal document. It's a word template. You didn't even spell authority right." The neighbors burst into laughter, some even clapping. Karen's face turned crimson and she screamed over them, "Stop laughing! I am the authority here." But Daniels wasn't done. He looked at the men in black uniforms and said, "Where did you get those badges?" The leader stammered, Online. Collector's items." Daniels' eyes hardened. "Impersonating an officer is a felony. You know what that means, right?" 2 deputies had arrived by then, stepping out with cuffs ready. The crowd leaned in, filming every second. Karen panicked, pointing wildly at me and my wife. "You don't understand. They're the criminals. She pulled a gun on us. She threatened us." My wife finally spoke, her voice cutting through the chaos. "You pointed first. It's all on camera." I tapped my phone, showing the live feed from our security system. The moment Karen saw herself ordering fake cops to pull guns, her jaw dropped. No, you can't. Delete that." "Delete it!" she screamed, clawing at the air like she could snatch the video away. But the damage was done. The neighbors weren't just watching anymore. They were cheering. Karen's screams echoed across the street. But the deputies ignored her, moving straight toward the fake officers. One by one, they were disarmed, their badges stripped, their weapons checked and tagged. The leader tried to resist, but Daniels pressed him against the hood of the cruiser with a single sharp move. "You're done playing cop," he growled. The crowd cheered louder, some even chanting, "Lock her up! Lock her up!" Phones were everywhere, capturing every angle. Karen spun in circles, pointing fingers, her voice cracking under the weight of panic. "You can't do this! I own this neighborhood! I am the HOA!" Daniels didn't even look at her. He motioned to his deputy. "Cuff her, too." The moment the metal clicked around her wrists, the crowd erupted. She kicked and thrashed, screaming, "I'll sue all of you! I'll take your houses! You'll regret this." But her voice was drowned out by the neighbors laughing, some shouting, "About time!" My wife stood tall, arms crossed, calm as ever. She didn't need to gloat. Her silence was louder than any victory speech. She just looked at me and said quietly, "Told you they'd fold." Karen was shoved into the back of the cruiser, still ranting, still claiming power she never had. Daniels shook his head and muttered, "Every street's got one." He turned to us, his tone softening. "You two handled this right. Proud of you for keeping calm, especially you," he said, nodding at my wife. "Most people would have pulled that trigger the moment a gun was pointed at them." She gave a small smile. "I don't fight unless I have to, but I don't back down either." The deputies loaded the fake cops into the cruiser, while the neighbors lingered in clusters, buzzing like they had just witnessed a live TV drama. Phones were still up, live streams still running. Karen's voice could barely be heard now, muffled by the cruiser glass as she pounded her fists against the window, screaming about lawyers and ownership. Nobody cared anymore. One neighbor, an older man with a flag on his porch, stepped forward and saluted my wife. "Ma'am, thank you for your service. People like her think they can bully everyone. Glad someone finally stood up. My wife returned a respectful nod. Though she looked almost embarrassed by the attention, Daniels turned back to us with a rare smile. We'll be pressing charges, impersonating an officer, brandishing a firearm, harassment, trespassing. She's looking at a long list. And you, he pointed at me, better keep that footage safe. It's evidence, and it's also the nail in her coffin. Karen must have heard that through the glass, because she started thrashing even harder, screaming, "You can't arrest me! I am the HOA. This whole block answers to me." Daniels chuckled under his breath. Not anymore. As the cruisers pulled away, the neighbors broke into applause, some even whistling. For the first time since we moved in, I felt the weight lift from my chest. No more fake notices. No more threats. The so-called queen of the block had finally been dethroned, and it was caught on 10 different cameras. My wife slipped her hand into mine and said softly, she thought she had power. Turns out all she had was paper. The street grew quiet after the cruisers disappeared, leaving only neighbors still buzzing about what they had seen. Some shook our hands, others promised to share the video far and wide. For once, we weren't the outsiders anymore. We were the couple who stood up to Karen and won. I glanced at my wife, still steady, still calm, like nothing had rattled her. "You didn't even flinch when that gun was in your face," I whispered. She squeezed my hand, her voice low but fierce. "I've faced worse overseas. A bully in a HOA uniform? That doesn't scare me." The older man with the flag raised his voice so the crowd could hear. "That's what America is about, standing your ground. Land, family, freedom. Nobody takes that from you." His words hit hard, and people clapped again, some even wiping their eyes. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low and the street finally calmed, I replayed the security footage one more time. Every second of Karen's downfall was there. Her fake authority, her hired imposters, her screaming meltdown. I uploaded it to the neighborhood group chat, and within minutes the comments exploded. "She finally got what she deserved." "Best thing I've ever seen." "Respect to your wife, she's a hero." I closed my phone, wrapped an arm around my wife and whispered, "We're not going anywhere. This is our home." She smiled, looking out at the house we fought to protect. And no HOA bully is ever going to take it from us. For the first time since moving in, the night felt peaceful, because justice wasn't just done, it was witnessed. And it sent a message that no fake authority could ever silence. You don't mess with a soldier's family on their own land.